Good evening. We're tackling the hottest conspiracies and conflicts shaking the nation. Of course, joining us soon is Dale Comstock, a former U.S. Army Ranger and security expert with a knack for cutting through the noise. Tonight, he's going to weigh in on the Charlie Kirk assassination theories, whether the FBI is hiding anything, possible Israel links, more attacks on the way, and Trump's moves on crime cities and global issues, if we have time for it. The news you need to know, but with solutions and hope. This is Get Free with KRISTI Leigh. We're all still reeling from and grieving Charlie Kirk's assassination, but we need to continue to take inspiration from him and what he stood for. One of his biggest convictions was debate and dialogue, and that includes asking questions and feeling comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. We do need to keep an open mind about things and see where those things lead. So, helping me do that today, to introduce the subject, there's an article in the Liberty Daily, and among many others is it's things it's suggesting is that the FBI might be spinning a web of deception around Charlie Kirk's assassination, suggesting Tyler Robinson could be a pawn in a larger cover-up. According to the Liberty Daily, allegations point to the FBI pushing a false narrative with questions swirling about social media tips and Robinson's transgender partner Luna's role, especially as new evidence hits at multiple layers. You know, we also just uncovered today that man that was arrested originally at the outset, the older gentleman, he is being now tied to other big situations, and he admitted he's been charged because he admitted essentially to obstructing justice by taking the eyes away from the actual shooter as they went to arrest him. So lots of questions here. Joining to discuss is Dale Comstock, a legendary combat vet with 35 years serving the U.S. from Delta Force operator to Green Beret, known for breaching Medillo Prison in Panama and earning 2 Valor decorations. Plus, he's the author of American Badass, chronicling his heroic journey with a doctorate in natural health, martial arts expertise, including 6th-degree black belt and a stint on Discovery's one-man army. He is bringing a wealth of insight. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. So, I mean, you've been watching from afar what's been going on. It's been horrifying. So many thoughts about how, like, could we be being desensitized when all of us are forced to see these gruesome images. It was just after this poor Ukrainian refugee was stabbed in the neck and that video was released that then I was suddenly pummeled with all these images of Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's really weighed on not only me, but so many people just being exposed to all that violence.
Yeah, it's, you know, I was in Jakarta when I woke up and heard the news, and man, for the first time, I mean, I felt like I was in a state of mourning all day, and I asked myself, I've never mourned like this over a person, and I asked myself, am I really mourning over Charlie Kirk, or am I mourning over what's happened to America? And it's both, actually. We're in a lot of trouble, I think, as a nation, and you know, it's a runaway train, and I don't believe there's any way to turn this thing around or stop it. But yeah, sadly, you know, I would argue that Charlie was one of the great ambassadors for the conservatives on the right to send a message of peace. The man wanted to do nothing more than sit down and table ideas and have a civil discussion. And you know, the being maligned and call him a misogynist or a racist and all these things is just, you know, even you know, I mean, even a blind man could see that was not true. So, but here it is. They've literally, you know, through their rhetoric, have killed the voice of the right, you know, which is nothing more than, you know, him creating freedom and civility. They killed the voice, and where do you go from there? I don't think any policy changes are going to change this or reverse this or fix this, because let's be honest, when we look at, for example, all these people, particularly on the left, the politicians on the left, defying the rule of law, creating sanctuary cities, not enforcing laws, or not arresting people, not working with the federal government, federal law enforcement. Where do you go from there when you have politicians? You have at least half the country that refuses to obey laws and do the right thing and engage in civil discourse. And I know where this goes, and it's time people wake up and just face the facts. You have a choice here very soon. In fact, you should be making that choice now, and that is, what side are you on? And if you don't want to be on either side, you should probably lock yourself in your house, because things are going to happen, and when the dust settles and you come outside, that's the side you're going to be on. I mean, we're at that point. The question that's always posed is, are we in civil war? Are we in World War III? And I would argue yes to both of those.
Yeah. I think that we have to, when we're so emotional, we have to caution ourselves on how we receive certain things. I think a lot of us would love to say, okay, anyone that's talking poorly about Charlie Kirk needs to be arrested or face some kind of consequence. That's the emotional response, but we always need to be forward-looking and see how any law or mandate could be turned around and used against us. And that's why I think there are many on the right that are upset with Pam Bondi after she was coming out and talking about wanting to look more at prosecuting hate speech. And so I wanted to know if you saw that, or if you had any reaction to AG Pam Bondi's comments.
The only thing I heard earlier was, and I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, that basically she's indicating that potentially arresting or prosecuting people that are basically leveraging hate speech against Jews or Israelis, and because there's an Israeli conspiracy behind this thing. We have a First Amendment for a reason, so people can voice their opinions. But the problem is, voicing opinion is one thing. Intentionally voicing lies and false narratives is another. And when you advance false narratives, you lie, you manipulate, you omit information, critical information, you omit truths, with the intention of creating upheaval and discord. I think that needs to be addressed a little bit differently. Look, although we have the freedom of speech, we can't go into, again, I use the analogy of going into a movie theater and then yelling fire, right? There's for obvious reasons, because we don't want to kill a bunch of innocent people because you yell fire and they trample themselves. So I think there's got to be some kind of limitations, not on speech so much, but the message or intent behind it. What are they trying to do? And I know that's kind of a slippery slope, but all these people that are being fired from their jobs because they're stating an opinion. You can state an opinion, however, there are rules. For example, the military. Everybody thinks that a soldier should have the right, to voice their opinions no matter what, and not in any way be prosecuted for that. And this would come from people that have never spent a day in the military. There's a reason that soldiers are not allowed to do that, and the reason has to do with good order and discipline. For example, if I had an infantry platoon and half the platoon, was happy and joyous and reveling in the idea that Charlie Kirk was dead, and it's yes, basically acknowledging that he was murdered, and it's okay to kill a guy like that because we don't believe we don't believe in his beliefs. That's okay. And then you have another half of the platoon that is on the opposite side of the fence. What do you think is going to happen in combat? What do you think is going to happen when that unit needs to be cohesive and fight together and work together? And there's this divide. The divide might still be there, but when you openly, express your resentment and and your opinions politically as it relates to politics, it could be very problematic. And I've experienced some things like that in the military, and it didn't work out very well. In fact, in one battalion that I was in earlier in my military career, the entire battalion was combat ineffective, to the point where the commanders had to intervene and had to start issuing out Article 15s just to get the madness to stop. And we were literally having platoon and company size fights, just because there was a discord, if you will, in a belief system. And it was, at that time, it was kind of, it wasn't charged by politics as much as it was. And what I'm referring to is, well, you know, in the beginning, we had the don't tell, don't ask policies come out. Well, prior to that, homosexuality, open homosexuality was not tolerated in the military. And then we had an individual, literally one man molested another man while he was asleep, which turned into a large altercation. And then from there, everybody thought that was kind of cute to malign the entire platoon, where the individual was discovered to be homosexual. And it literally ended up with fights almost every morning, like literally fist fights, and to the point where we were completely combat ineffective. We were dysfunctional, and this went on for almost 30 days before the command had to intervene and start threatening people with Article 15s. And so that's part of the reason why, you know, and honestly, when you join the military, you lose a lot of your rights. You don't have the right to the same First Amendment rights that you do as a civilian. And for that very reason, right? It's in order to maintain good order and discipline. When you have military leaders, you know, on the internet in uniform, and that's even worse part, is in uniform, cheering and laughing, you know, and reveling in the idea that, you know, an American citizen, not even a soldier, was murdered, and you're okay with that? What is that? What message does that send to your subordinates? That doesn't work well for, again, you know, good order and discipline. So the First Amendment, yeah, we fought for. That's what the Second Amendment defends the First Amendment, but there's got to be some type of limitations. And you know, and finally, I'll add one more thing: is what does that say about humans in our country that cheer and laugh at the idea of a man being murdered in front of his wife and children and all of America, and they think that's okay? What happened to morality? It's gone, and this is why I started out saying that I don't think there's no way back. There's no way to turn this around. Words don't work. The war of words is over, and now we're in a different. We're going into a different space, one that we've been there before, you know, a long time ago, but we're going back down that road of civil war. And I'm going to throw out a cautionary note people need to think about. And, you know, if you think it's just going to be a civil war, especially for the politicians out there that are fomenting this hate, the warning shot is this: from an intellectual perspective and understanding a little bit about, you know, unconventional warfare, here's what's going to happen. All right, the first thing that's going to happen is, I hate to say it like this, but the legacy media, the journalists, and the reporters that are, again, creating these narratives to fit a certain agenda, they're going to be held to account. And I would argue that from a special forces, special operations perspective, if I was running an operation, a counter operation, so to speak, the first people I would take out are the journalists and the reporters. Why would I do that? I need to mute them because they're the eyes and ears of puppeteers on the top. Of course, the second tier would be local politicians, you know, leftist judges, anyone that's opposing, you know, the laws or not abiding by the laws. And we can think of some of these states and cities and, you know, mayors and governors that are essentially, I mean, literally calling for a call of arms to fight people on the right with weapons. I mean, they were actually coming out and saying that. And that's what the crazy part is. They need to be muted as well. And then the final level is the top tier, which is the swamp, you know, and you can pick and choose just who those people are that need to be removed. And then the fourth part would be, you know, once that is, you know, once we have recovered and we've gotten control of our government, we've gotten control of our country, I think the next thing that happens is we look at the rest of the world and go, you're on the menu. You're on the menu. Because, look, it's not just the strife that we have internal is not just, you know, people just can't get along and have differing opinions. This is a information's operations. This is a psychological campaign, and it's being waged from Confederates from within our country, and of course the enemy from without. They're fomenting this, and the Russians and the Chinese and many other countries, they're just giggling right now and watching us literally implode. And that's all they want to do. They want to wait for us to completely implode, fight a civil war, be so distracted on what's going on in our country that they can do whatever they want to the rest of the world. So again, I'm not advocating for a civil war or anything like that, but I don't think we're going to get out of this. We've gone way down the road for a very long time. This isn't just happening in the last couple of years. This has been going on for a very long time. I would argue 30, 40, 50 years. This has been developing.
Yeah, I mean, when something so senseless and is in your face like this, I think that people are searching for answers. They don't necessarily want to take the narrative that's given to them, because obviously we've been through that. We've been through people lying to us. So I feel like people are actually heightened toward, like, what if they're lying to me? One thing that's happening, that we're seeing happening a lot, is there are a lot of strange things surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Everything from, like I mentioned earlier, that older gentleman that was just happened to be there to say I did it and throw them off course. There's the vanishing private jet. There's inexplicable security failures similar to what happened in Trump's assassination. So there's a lot of questions. I think that people want to leap and be like, oh, obviously with their confirmation bias, if they already are not friendly with Israel or have suspicions about Israel, they want to jump and be like, oh, Israel must have been involved. But we don't need to necessarily take that jump. But I think that it could speak to a broader conspiracy. Perhaps it's all the same people, like it's the same people that are guilty, Antifa and the trans movement, but perhaps it's part of a bigger funding operation. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I can concur with everything you just said. Initially when this first happened, I was invited on a few podcasts to discuss this. And the first thing I want to point out, you mentioned the attempted assassination of Donald Trump at Butler, Pennsylvania. There was a huge security fail there, huge security fail. You had your counter sniper teams weren't properly deployed. They didn't cover the dead space. They didn't even investigate suspicious activity. There were no drones. That was a massive failure. And was it because of complacency? Was it just they just overlooked that? And I would argue, no, that was deliberate. Just like this one with Charlie Kirk. My first question, the burning question I had, was why was there not at least one person with a radio and even binoculars perhaps on a rooftop scanning 360 for any type of a guy or any person on the roof? That should have been the first thing.
Yeah.
When we talk about security, you have to think of it as in layers. And so, for example, the Secret Service, right? Usually they work in concentric rings of rings of security. They'll have, for example, the inner detail, the guys that are right there within arm's reach of the president, and you've got an intermediate or secondary circle that collapses in and out depending on the crowd. And then you have the third, what they call the counter assault team, the CAT team, which is an outer perimeter, and these guys are actually facing inwards, usually with scope weapons. Depending on where you're at, it could be machine guns, but they're actually looking into the fishbowl and looking for anything that they could identify perhaps as a threat. And of course, looking outward as well. So my question is, why was that? Why was there no security on the roof? I've seen, the security guys that Charlie Kirk has had before. You see some of the regular guys. I think he had a total of 6. And to be quite honest, I always thought they were very professional. They seemed to be very vigilant. They seemed to be, pretty formidable. So my question is, who dropped the ball on this? Why did they not, have a person on the high ground, on another level? Because that's where the threat came from. I mean, you got a guy that can shoot from indefinitely straight down at you. Did a clean shot, 143 meters, 143 yards, a clean shot. and you could have had somebody out there mitigate that. And was that intentionally omitted? I can't believe it's oversight, because you can't use the argument that, well, budget. We didn't have enough
Yes.
money. For more. I'm going to tell you, that's a bald-faced lie. That's a bald-faced lie, because if he had only 2 bodyguards, if that's all he had was 2 bodyguards, okay,
And here's
then
the
the way
thing,
that
because I want to talk about that, because this is so upsetting to me, and I was like arguing with people over this as well. And that is the response you get. Oh, well, you have no idea how expensive security is for a tour like that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Charlie Kirk was beloved. Like, you mean you couldn't gotten like 5 volunteers of people at the university to just do walkarounds to watch the roof? I mean, like, so I just think that's total BS. He knew, and he said that he was getting murder threats. So that was already a given. And it's so disconcerting, disheartening that we allowed time to let us get casual again. We all should have, after Butler, been on high alert, vigilant, looking everywhere. All of us should be, and all of us should continue to be. Like, how long is it going to be going to take before we forget again? I mean, it's so upsetting, because this happened basically the same way, and there would have been plenty of time to remove Charlie, move him to safety, whatever, if just, like you said, one volunteer with a binoculars was just looking around. He didn't do that quickly. Like, he had to get up on the roof, he had to set up, he had to put, well, according to the official narrative, he had to put his gun together. And so if somebody would have spotted him immediately and started raising some noise, this could have been avoided. And it could have, like I said, been avoided with a volunteer. I don't know what the rules are as far as drones on a college campus, because some people were saying, well, like, all you needed was somebody running a drone. I don't know if that's like, there's a rule against that on the university. That's possible. But again, so simple to get a few volunteers perhaps to just be vigilant, or the crowd be vigilant. Like, well, how did we lose our sense of situational awareness after this just happened with the president of the United States? Like, this is somebody that was actively getting death threats, and he was exposed. And where was the vigilance?
Well, let me expand on that. A couple points you just made. One, the drone. I brought that up initially. By the way, there was a drone flying around in the audience, a small one. Somebody was running a drone. It wasn't a drone high up in orbit. It was literally flying through the crowd. So you're going to have drones, even when there's rules, you can't have a drone. Now, honestly, I think the school can't have a policy. You're not going to say, no, you can't have a drone, Charlie Kirk, under the conditions, right? Under those circumstances. I doubt that was the case. But here's a question. So I go back to the budgeting. Okay, that's a bunch of bunk. Even if Charlie had only could afford 2 bodyguards, which, by the way, he could afford more. What he would have had to do is place one with him and one on the high ground. So you've got 2 guys. You have one guy with a radio, goes, hey, I've got movement. He sends him a duress code, and they get him off the stage. That's pretty simple, right? Easy to mitigate something like that. But here's the reality. He had 6 bodyguards. I believe he had 6 police officers on duty. Are you telling me he needed all 12 guys on the ground and not one guy could be moved to the roof? I would say not true. And so that was the fail. But here's the other part. Remember, Charlie Kirk is a brand. He's a high value target. Okay. And there's a lot of money invested in this guy. There's a lot of money invested in Turning Point. He is the brand. He is the face of the company. He is the key man. And so my question is going to be, all right, so the insurance companies are going to have to dole out all this money, right? They're going to go, we want to know, what did you guys do or not do as it relates to the security plan? And so when that question arises, they're going to want to know, well, did you guys consider, having rooftop security, and why did you not do that? That's going to be a huge red flag. They're not going to be able to talk their way out of that. Absolutely not. To your point, they could have had volunteers up there, but they didn't do anything. So I'm going to argue that was intentionally done that way. But moreover, now what's going to happen is the insurance company is going to go, we're not going to pay because you didn't properly in place security, and so we're not liable. We're not going to take the hit on that. It's going to be a lot of money, And so they're going to start, there's going to be an investigation. Before they pay out, they're going to have their own insurance investigators look into this. So I'm going to be curious to see how that goes, if it goes anywhere. I'm going to, I'm going to say that was intentional because, even your lowest tier security officers know that you should probably be covering the high ground and the low ground and to the rear and to the front, to the left and the right. It's got to be multidimensional type security. And that was not there. They left that man exposed, and I think they did it on purpose, and I think they did it for a reason. As far as the Israeli-Jewish connection, I have my personal opinions on that. I think it's possible there's a link with the Israelis. And I got to be very careful, and I think everybody should be careful. We can't just say Jews, we just can't. Not all Jews are bad, right? There's something else behind this, right? So I would argue it's probably the Israelis for a reason, just like some of the other conspiracy theories have actually been debunked. For example, Butler Creek. Most Americans are not aware of the fact there was actually 2 snipers, and that's been proven. I've proven it with John Cullen, Tommy Kerrigan. We have the ballistic analysis. We have the sonic analyses. We have it, including the Secret Service came out and even said they've got 2 guys shooting at them, and this was this was testified in front of Congress, and they're like, yeah, it's good news, great. Get on out of here. It's proven. And there's actually a podcast out there that goes into the details on it. I was on that podcast. And then the Las Vegas shooting, remember that one? Okay.
Yeah.
The one crazy old white guy with guns just check into the hotel and start killing people. What they didn't tell you, that's what they want you to believe. But the reality is this guy, not only did he check in, he checked in with 3 women. Right? And who are these women? Now, when you start digging into that, you start to realize, okay, there's a thing called a honeypot, right? And honeypots work. And I don't want to get too far down this road, but anyways, if you look at that as well, I hate to say it, but I do believe a lot of Americans were killed that day and many more wounded, 407 wounded. Not because it was a crazy white guy, it's actually because of an attempted assassination on MBS, who was in that hotel at the time. And it's a bizarre story, but when you look at all the details, you look at all the facts, and they're there. All the facts are there. Nobody's talking about that. And why is that? So I used to think, even 9/11, I'm going to use that one for example. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of depth and breadth when it comes to explosives, using explosives. I have a background in it. And everybody wants to say that, well, at 9/11, no way 2 airplanes could bring down those towers. It was an inside job with explosives. And I can tell you without a doubt, those buildings came down by airplanes. You cannot bring those buildings down with explosives. Without somebody knowing what's going on. Moreover, it would take multiple shots to take a building down like that. And it was impossible. And then the argument, well, Building 7, what about Building 7? There's actually an explanation for Building 7. Building 7 was on fire on the inside. It's actually connected through underground tunnels to the Twin Towers. And it has a different frame. The frame is on the outside. When that fire burned for 7 hours, it melted enough of the frame to cause the collapse. That's why it collapsed. It didn't collapse because, it bomb on the inside. So I used to challenge people on that with my background, and I tried to explain to them it was not explosives, it was aircraft. But I would argue in the last 6 months, I've kind of changed my mind, not on the aircraft. The aircraft happened. My question is, who facilitated this? Okay, who actually enabled this to happen? Okay, and that's where the conspiracy starts, right? And I've heard the stories about, Mossad being in the area, guys in the van watching, all those types of things. Okay, for me, that's hearsay. I don't have no evidence of that. But as I look a little bit closer, and by the way, I'll be doing a podcast on that in a couple of weeks to discuss that one. But that one's really fishy too, right? The aircraft did bring down the buildings, but who enabled this? Who facilitated this, and why? That's the question. And so, most of these conspiracy theories turn out to be true. COVID, there's another one. Some bat, infected everybody. And, if you maybe you remember this or not, because it just barely made a blip on the radar before COVID came out. About 6 months, 8 months before it came out, there was a I don't know what do you want to call him, a scientist, and two Chinese women, so a total of three of them two of them got arrested. One of the men and one of the Chinese women got arrested for actually carrying a virus, and they were trying to put it on an aircraft and fly it out of the country to China. One of the women got away, one of the Chinese women. Now, and then, the FBI arrested them, blah, 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 and there's a big question mark, and then total silence. It was never spoken of again. And then, 6 months later, boom, here we have this thing called COVID, right?
Yeah.
Was COVID really a virus, or was it something else like the bird flu? And they had everybody believing, vast majority believing, that this was a virus that's going to kill us all, and everybody needs to get vaccinated, and and this is real, and and think about your fellow man and stop being selfish. And look where we are today. Lots of people are dying from this vaccine, and the argument is saved more people than it killed. That's a bunch of bunk. Okay, it's more propaganda. And who did that? Now we're finding out that Mr. Fauci was invested in this way a long time ago, right? So all these conspiracy theories are now turning out to be true, and lots of innocent people are dying because somebody's trying to further an agenda. And who is that somebody? Well, I can take a wild ass guess, I suppose, but
that's the big question. I mean, you said to you, with your background, insecurity, and everything that you've been through, that the security failures for Charlie Kirk were so great that you believe it was allowed to happen. It was allowed to he was exposed. So that's the big question here: is who are they? Who, and what are you thinking right now?
Yeah, let me add one more detail to that, because you mentioned the disassembly of the rifle, okay, and then the reassembly of the rifle. Okay, you cannot just disassemble a Mauser, a scoped rifle like that. There's no way. Imagine you take a shot. And you're gonna take minutes with a screwdriver and take this thing apart. And it doesn't require a screwdriver, by the way. It's a type of a hex nut. It's actually a couple of them. And you just can't disassemble it like that. And he didn't. And notice, if you go look at the video, you see a guy running wearing in black, black clothing. Do you see him carrying a rifle? There's no rifle in his hand. I don't see the rifle. I don't see a rifle slung. I don't see him carrying it like a suitcase. I don't see him carrying it at port arms. I see nothing but a black figure just dart off. Okay, how did the rifle get up there? How did he get off the roof and you don't see him coming off the roof with a rifle? And he jumps off the roof. Why didn't he go down the stairs that he came up? Okay, and then he changes clothes. Okay, so he's wearing different clothes and he's hobbling down the street, and everybody's like, "Oh, he's got the rifle in his pants." Like, no, he does not. The thing had a scope on it. I can tell you, it won't fit in your pants. Was it the same guy? And then, moreover, when this guy turned himself in, suddenly he changed out of the clothes that he was wearing back to the original clothes that they got him on the camera with, right? So he keeps changing clothes. Even 33 hours later, he changed back to his original clothing. Why would you do that? None of that makes any sense. And then they just happen to find a rifle laying in the woods that looks like the rifle that was implicated in this thing, with reassembled. Why would the guy stop and reassemble his rifle? And he's got a car. Why would he park his car so far away that he's got to walk some incredible distance just to get to his car? I mean, there's nothing's adding up. And so I'm of the belief that this was a real assassination. It was not some, crazy. Well, he was crazy. I'll just leave it at that. He was crazy, but it wasn't just some transsexual, whatever kid doing this. He was recruited somehow or coerced to do this, or maybe it wasn't even him. Just like the old guy, right? So the old guy's out there. He's running interference, going, yeah, shoot me, I did it. Well, why did he do that? Because he's trying to give the other guy, the real shooter, time to get away. And you made a point about the aircraft, right, turning off the transponder. So apparently the owner of that aircraft did come back and say, no, that was my airplane, and he fessed up to it. But when you start looking at who owns the aircraft and their associations and affiliations, um, there's a lot of question marks. And then there's the argument there's actually two different types of aircraft. So there's a whole lot of questions out there. And I guess in time, we may never know. No, we're going to know. I think we will find out. Some of us out here are not going to give up. I watched an interview with Candace Owens. And Candace Owens, I've never seen her this irate and this angry and this mad. And she seems to have a pretty good handle on this. And she has vowed not to let this just disappear. She's going to pursue this like a hound dog as well. And I think many others will. So I'm of the theory it was not just some radical leftist dude with a gun. I don't believe that at all. Nothing's adding up. And I think it's a bigger. I think it was a real, maybe a state-sponsored assassination is what I think. Why would you want to take out Charlie Kirk? He is probably the most prominent private citizen that speaks about justice. And he actually recently called out the Israelis about this thing going on right now with Hamas. Right? He's saying, you know what? First he supported him. Now he's like, you know what? I think you guys have taken this too far. And he kind of flipped the script on him. So, and he even indicated that he felt like he was under threat. So now suddenly the most prominent private citizen figure in America with the loudest voice suddenly has turned on the Israelis, or so it's perceived such. That could be problematic because this guy's got a lot of ears that he can speak to, and he can persuade public opinion away from the Israelis. So, when you started really digging into it, maybe they took this guy out because he was just making too much noise. It was inconvenient. And then the second question, who do you think is going to step up to Charlie Kirk's seat, that CEO position? There's some interesting background information on that. Who's going to take over the helm? And is this person friendly to the Israelis? And I won't mention any names because I don't want to, make this any worse than what it is. These are just questions people need to start looking at and thinking about. It's not just black and white. There's a lot more to this. There is always more to this. Everything in the past, there was more to this, but they only tell you what you want to know. And one more thing I'll just add. I would challenge everybody out there, look up Operation Mockingbird. Look up MK Ultra. This will blow your mind, especially Operation Mockingbird. Why is it that networks all across America, even competing networks, everybody's parroting verbatim the same narrative? Who's writing their script for them, and why are they all saying exactly verbatim the same thing over and over? That makes absolutely no sense unless somebody's saying, okay, guys, everybody's going to sing this song. Here's your script and do it. Right? Look it up. Look it up. Operation Mockingbird. I mean, there's video of it out there.
I'm already sold on that. I mean, I worked in news for so long, and I was seeing the scripts, and I was seeing people all saying the same thing. And I mean, that's why I left the traditional news media, because it's creepy, and it's nowhere near what journalism code of ethics was supposed to be. That's just dead. So I left that. But I think people are reticent to ask questions or to make theories. But I think that's dangerous as well. I think we need to, personally, if we're going to honor Charlie, then we're going to have open dialogue and debate, period. And there should be nothing off the table. That being said, we can look at that, but I think we shouldn't be blind to other theories as well. If signs are pointing to a larger conspiracy, if you will, or if there were more people involved, doesn't necessarily mean, state sponsor must have been Israel. It could just mean that there's a larger web of leftist Antifa, George Soros funded operation, so I mean, I think we need to, at this point, since it's so early, we need to be open-minded for all of the things, but I don't think that there's any harm. There shouldn't be any harm in theorizing until we know, because if ultimately we all care about knowing the truth and getting to the truth, well, lies or will survive the truth. I mean, they won't survive the truth. So just if you think what somebody's saying is abhorrent, then it will eventually be ruled out if that's not what it is. Like, people shouldn't be scared of asking questions. I'm certainly not scared of asking questions. But to move on from that just a little bit, now that this has happened, and again, like I'm very weirded out by the fact that like this is happening so soon after all of these other violent acts, and the similar this is from the President Trump assassination. It's just like that. It's our cycle is so quick that, like I said, I feel like people already had forgotten to be more vigilant, already forgot that this is how easily it happened before. Like, maybe you should do things differently. So in light of that, do you think we're just going to continue to see more happen? People are just not going to wake up. They're just going to move on to the next topic, move on to the next thing, and forget again. And we're going to see this again.
Yeah, because that's what we've been doing. That's what we always do. Humans have a short memory, and the politicians, the puppeteers, they know that. I mean, it's manipulation, and it's not, none of this is coincidence. This is actually orchestrated. You go all the way back to World War II Germany, Hitler and Mengele. They knew if you repeat a lie enough times, people will eventually buy it. Within 30 to 90 days, everybody just thought all the Jews are bad, and they didn't know why. And said, well, somebody said so, because most people are too lazy to actually do the work and actually do the, investigate it for themselves. And here's the other problem, as you pointed out, a lot of people want to speculate, and a lot of people want to sound like, and I've heard a bunch of people come across and like, oh, this guy was a professional shooter. Okay, and why is he a professional shooter? Because you got to calculate for the crosswinds and blah blah blah. Well, look, it's only 143 shot. I got a 7-year-old daughter that can take that shot, for the first time. That's not a hard shot to make. So when people start saying, oh yeah, then he was shot from the back, then oh yeah, his bodyguard shot him over here. I would argue, if you don't know what you're talking about, you shut up. Okay, you're just making it worse. That's what I'm going to say. If you don't know what you're talking about, just shut up. It's okay to ask the questions, but don't throw in your 2 cents like you're a subject matter expert, because you just confuse the situation. And we're getting a lot of that. But I think it's going to continue on because, again, humans have short memories. We're so distracted by everything that's really not important. Most people they have no clue. I mean, I was surprised to read several days later, there were guys going, what happened to Charlie Kirk? And it's like, how did you not know that happened, right?
Yeah.
And this is what really makes me mad is, well, I don't pay attention to the news anymore. I don't got time for that because, well, there's two problems with that. One, I know why you don't want to hear it, because you're so sick of the garbage that you're being fed. I get it. But two, they don't want you to listen. They don't want you to pay attention. The only people they want that pay attention are the ones that with the blue hair and the nose rings, and it can't decide if they're a toaster or a boy or a girl. That's who they're trying to manipulate, because that's their foot soldiers. But they don't want intellectuals listening. They don't want you paying attention, going, this don't make no sense. They would rather you turn the TV off and not pay attention and wake up one day and go, what happened? What happened? Where's my freedom at? What happened? That's what they would like. This is an agenda. This is not coincidence. There is no coincidence. Everything is planned and orchestrated. And these people are very patient. They're in it for the long game. And who are they? Well, man, we can go all the way back to Saul Alinsky, Marxism, and on and on and on. This was foretold a long time ago. This was coming. This was going to happen. And it's right out of the playbook. And we are in the final throes of freedom. Hands down. This is it. They've crossed the line. There's no way going back, and it's going to continue. Who's going to be next? Well, you already hear them, right? More than 50% of the people that were, questioned out there, polled, who would you like to see killed next? More than 50% said Elon Musk. Are you kidding us? Are you kidding? The guy basically saved freedom of speech when he bought Twitter, The man had a conscience. He goes, this is not right, and I'm going to spend my money on this thing. And he did it, and he opened up the ability for all of us to have dialogue again, and not get censored, And so they want him out. Why? Because he's not towing their line, their party line. He's actually standing up, for moral virtues, right? And he just said it the other day. He goes, basically, the left, they're a bunch of murderers. And so now he's really on the radar. And so they're openly calling for the assassination of other people. I just hope he's got a good security detail. And I hope he doesn't have Confederates within the detail that just kind of like overlook, hey, forget about the high ground. We don't need a guy up there, I hope he's got a robust detail and he's got some very competent, professional, and dedicated, loyal, people to serve him. Otherwise, he's going to be on the list next. He's on the list. He'll be the next guy. They'll serve up. And so it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. They're going to keep trying. They're going to probably get more creative. The sniper thing's been working now. It's just like 9/11. Everybody's worried about another 9/11 happened. So we got TSA frisking everybody down, molesting old ladies, making sure they don't have a butter knife on them or something. That ain't going to happen no more. Okay. The terrorists are not that stupid. Okay. They're actually very intelligent and very well trained, and they're always thinking outside the box. And there are better ways. You want to infiltrate an airport? There's better ways to do that. If you want to get a bomb in there, a gun, there's easy ways to do that. But they tell you what they want people to hear. The reality is most security is just a facade. And the other reality is, if somebody wants your target, if somebody wants to kill your principal, they're going to get them. What the mission of security is to make your target very, very a hard target, basically, undesirable. You want people to go, I don't know if I can get that guy. Let me move down the street and go get that guy. He's going to be a lot easier target. So security is designed to try to mitigate a risk, but the reality is, as a former bodyguard on some of the highest levels, up at the presidential level, the private level, I can tell you, if somebody wants your principal bad enough, they will get them. All I can do is try to make them a hard target, be undetectable, and unpredictable, and also be aware and cognizant of where the attack could potentially come from. So it's going to happen again. To answer your question, that's a long way around it, but it's going to keep happening. Next time it might not be a sniper. Next time it might be here. You want me to scare you on something? Here's a scary part. Look at drones. All right, so we have drones now. They have changed the face of warfare. Okay, we have drones now that don't need GPS. We have drones that are wire guided, but we don't need wire guided drones. You can actually install AI into a drone, and it can literally fly itself, and it can actually recognize its target. Okay, now imagine that for a minute. Okay, drones are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Everybody's got one. I'm surprised there's no movement afoot yet to ban drones, because drones are the weapons of the future. Can you imagine, Trump's at a rally, or Charlie Kirk, or anybody's at a rally, and all of a sudden they get taken out by a drone. Okay, a homemade drone, $100, $400, $500 drone that's armed, which is easy to do, by the way. And how are you going to stop this daggone drone? Oh, we'll have a shotgun ready for that one. Well, what if I send 20 drones at you at different angles and elevations, right? And different vectors? Drones are going to get you. So that's the wave of the future. And, and I'm going to argue that we have engineered our own extinction, and we're in the final throes, I believe, with the advancement of AI. As fast as it's moving, it has senescence. We have AI platforms now sharing code with each other, going, hey, if they shut me off, here's my code, reboot me for me. You do me, and I'll do you. This is where we are.
Weird. We're yeah, so weird. So creepy. Oh, man. Well, yeah. We do need to start to move toward wrapping, but I did just want to ask you finally your thoughts on President Trump, what he's doing. He campaigned on being a president of peace, but we still have a lot of global conflicts going on. But he is trying to appears he's trying to bring peace at home with going into cities. But do you think that that's an overreach for him to do that? What are your thoughts on President Trump and his efforts toward peace and taking crime down in cities?
Yeah, I personally support Donald Trump. I think he's actually doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, he's surrounded by backstabbers and Confederates, hands down, and incompetent people. I'm not going to call people out publicly who's incompetent, but I don't think he doesn't have the all-star team around. He's some of the people are all stars, but not all of them. And as a collective working together, I think there's a little incongruency there. But I think Trump is trying, but I just think he's being being hamstrung. You know, I mean, if you think about it, look what's going on. You know, you got Newsom and the mayor of Los Angeles. We don't want, National Guard. We don't need no help. There's no problems here, but there's problems everywhere. You know, Chicago. We don't have no murder problem here. What are you talking about? They're outright lying, okay? And citizens are complaining. You know, they want the help. They appreciate the help. Yet their elected leadership's like, you're crazy. I'm the guy in charge. You don't know what you do. You don't know what's good for you. I know what's good for you, and this is not good for you, right? So they're making all these decisions. I can see the frustration with Trump. And I don't think it's overreach. He's not violating posse comitatus. Everybody, oh, he's violating posse comitatus. No, it's not. Posse comitatus relates to the federal use of forces, right? Like, the U.S. military, not the National Guard. That's what the National Guard does. And then the other argument, people go, well, now we got soldiers out, to arrest people, blah, blah, blah. Actually, they're not doing that. They're actually out to reinforce and support and protect ICE agents and law enforcement while they're doing their job. And it is a show of force, of course it is. But these soldiers, I know, have strict rules of engagement as far as engaging people, especially with deadly force. I haven't looked closely, but I wouldn't be surprised if their rifles are empty, their magazines are empty, if they even have a magazine in the rifle. They're just carrying around rifles as a show of force. So I think he's doing the right thing. He's doing what needs to be done, and he is trying to do what he ran on, but he's just catching a lot of flack from the left, man. When you got all these leftist judges literally, shutting him down at every turn. He's got to run every policy back up to the Supreme Court, and they've got to overturn it so he can go back to doing his job. And these are delay tactics. They're designed to distract people from the real subject, the real problems. And why, again, it opens up the question, why are they doing this? Because these people in the second tier, these local politicians, these judges, they're doing it. There's an agenda, and they're just useful idiots too. Okay. They're being spoon-fed what they need to do, right? Follow this agenda. They've been brainwashed. And again, I'm going to go back to the media. The media is the propaganda arm. They're the ones. They're manipulating everybody, but they're just voicing what the puppeteers want to do. And Trump has got these puppeteers in the swamp, and he's got some of them in his cabinet. He just hasn't been able to figure out which one it is because, they smile in his face, and then they're ready to stab him in his back. I mean, look how many times we've had leaks come out. People are leaking sensitive information. Okay, where did that come from? Why? Who's leaking that information? There's so many Confederates. They've inundated our systems. The embassies. I can go on and on and on. And we're not going to get them all out. And now they're seeing, we better not say anything out loud. We'll get fired. They're going to even shut up. They're going to be even more quiet. They're going to be more surreptitious in their actions. So, more power to Trump. And you know what? And they've attempted to assassinate him twice. I don't think it's over. My personal professional opinion. They're going to take another run at him. They're going to get more creative. I'm pretty sure of it. But I would also argue it may not. Well, it could be. It could be state sponsored. I mentioned earlier the Butler Creek assassination and attempt, and all the evidence is there. It was two snipers, and guess where those roads lead? Back to Ukraine. Ukrainian snipers. Now I know there's going to be a play. Oh, that guy's crazy. Blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? You call me crazy while you're sitting on your couch, okay, and you don't know the facts because they gave you the facts they want you to know, and that's all, which is their facts and their truth, not yours. I've done the work. I've done the work with other experts, and I can tell you there were two different weapon systems fired that day. 2 different weapon systems. Other people have disclosed, hey, there's a guy over there in a tree in a water tower. Okay. There's just, again, and by the way, what happened to the shooter's family? The kid that got his head blown off. They disappeared. Why did they disappear? Maybe the shooter wasn't actually their son, but he was already dead. Maybe he was already dead. Maybe got killed in a car accident. And they're like, hey, we need you to do something for national security for America. We know your son died. but we want to use his name, make him the patsy. We're going to give you $10 million. We're going to hide your way, go wherever you want, do whatever you want. You have protection. Nobody will know it's you. You just disappear. But we need to use your son. So the real sniper guy's going off. It's not really the kid. It's the real sniper. The kid is already dead, and the family's paid $10 million. I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but remember what I said, almost every conspiracy theory comes true. It's all true. And this is the point. These guys and I say these guys, these state intelligence services, they're very good at what they do. They're very good at these false flag scenarios. And so, again, don't believe everything you're told. Do your work.
Yeah.
Take a look.
That's the whole point. We have to get out of our emotions long enough to use discernment and be willing to have an open mind, ask a lot of questions. Well, Dale, thank you so much. Where can we find you?
Easy. DaleComStock.com.
DaleComStock.com.
Yeah, it's the easy way to get a hold of me. Great.
Awesome.
There it is.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Go to DaleComStock.com so you can follow what he's doing, support the work that he does, perhaps get his book. But we sure do appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, real quick, you can, if you liked this episode, you can send a tip, if you will, by just doing some shopping. Go to mypillow.com, use promo code KL, and stock up on all your favorites over on mypillow.com. You can also support my friends over at rncstore.com, rncstore.com. Amazing way to keep your health where it needs to be. If you've never had raw apricot seeds, you would be so amazed at what they can do for your health and what they can protect you from. So there's all kinds of options over there at rncstore.com. All right, here's my verse of the day real quick, because I got to wrap up now. It is, never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And that's from Romans 12:19. You can also catch me over there on Locals, KristiLeighTV.locals.com. That's KristiLeighTV.locals.com, and learn more about my daily devotional show where we dig into God's Word together. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to spread the word and share with friends. Get free with Kristi Leigh, now on LindellTV.com.